welcome to PSY 7103, Assignment 5. I'm Dr. Joel B. Goodin. For this task, you'll need to identify 8 new quantitative research articles. Count them. 8. Note, they need to be quantitative. So if they say qualitative words like perceptions, interviews, focus groups, experiences, those are some good signs that you have a qualitative study, and you shouldn't use it for this assignment. It can sometimes be hard to identify a quantitative article, and so you want to look for quantitative wording like relationship, impact, influence, variables, I'm going to put etc. You can Google or ask me if you need more help. I can certainly supply further discussion. Now, first choose 4 from the following 6 variables. Let's just say you use the first 4. There's 6 available, but let's say you choose these 4. Right, so mood, motivation, performance, happiness. Okay, then locate at least 2 quantitative research articles for each variable and examine how the variable has been operationalized. So, for this section, you're going to have, we're just going to call it mood article 1. And then mood article 2. Similarly, we're going to have motivation article 1 and article 2. And then it continues. And then that should say happiness. So you're going to have 4 sections. These are the sections. And you might have used leadership or anxiety instead. Make sure that mood, motivation, performance, happiness, leadership, or anxiety, whatever you choose, let's say you choose mood. Mood needs to be a primary variable in each article. So if it says mood, it definitely needs to be a mood variable. It could be depression, like it could be depression. I would not say happiness. It could be generally just mood. So make sure it has to do with mood. And must be quantitative. There are some that would disagree, but generally the stance of methodologists and researchers is that only quantitative variables are operationalized. Now let's get into what operationalized means before I go too much further. But this is the organization of your paper. You've chosen 4 from the following 6, and then you have located at least 2 quantitative research articles for each variable, and then you're going to examine how each variable has been operationalized in the 2 articles. So you're going to go one at a time. In, let's call this Goodin mood, it's not a real name, 2020, mood was operationalized as participants' scores on the Beck depression inventory. And you might go on to say the inventory provides a, however, I forget how much, you know, a 60-point system. That's not correct. Less than 30 points is considered depressed. So you're explaining how mood was measured, basically. How is it being activated in the research? Now, then you're going to go with as right? Remember when Facebook was young and they 14-year-old, I just assume 14-year-old kids would like make these quizzes about like, which animal are you? And or are you really in love? And just sort of nonsensical things that had nonsensical results. Those are still coming out, but I don't know who they're made by. So mood was operationalized as a person's score on a Facebook quiz made by a 14-year-old boy. It would tell you if you were in love or not in love or could be in love based on your answers to 10 questions that were made up by the 14-year-old. All right, here's an example of a really horrible instrument, and I don't know why Hammerschmidt would, that crazy loon, would be using this, but let's say that Hammerschmidt did. We're going to come back to this. One thing about the idea of love, and I used to use this always as an example of how do you operationalize love if there is no instrument built. So, you know, let's look at some options here. If you were to build an instrument that measured love, how would you operationalize it? Would you say gift giving to your partner? Would you say physical touch? Would you say words of affirmation, affection? Would you say commitment? So you could use a commitment scale, you know, that had all these questions, and that could be the way that you measured love. Or it could be some sort of questions about affection, and that could be your measurement of love. You could focus on words of affirmation, physical touch, and or gift giving. So what is it that sort of are the basics of love that if I ask about this and this and this and this, or maybe just one of them, maybe all I really need to know is about affection, signs of affection, physical touch. Maybe it's a mixture of all five. So what is it that you need to understand to operationalize it? And one study might use gift giving as a way to operationalize whether one loves one's partner. Well, if so, fine, as long as they're clear about that. So in the article that you read, and let's say you read an article and they operationalize love this way, all you need to do is to support or to explain that this is how they operationalized love. Similarly, if they operationalize it as physical touch, you would explain that. Now, are any of these good? Well, some are maybe better than others, and you can have sort of an opinion on those, and the more of an expert you are in this field of love, so to speak, then you could have different opinions about whether this would be a good operationalization, a good way to measure love and to get an accurate sort of result of whether a person loves their partner, for instance. So let's say those two happened, and then similarly and I encourage you to use an outline like this. Put the title here, or the full citation. And then you're going to do motivation, and again you're going to say in instead of measured by, operationalized as the number of times a person got up early to go to work. That could be a sign of motivation. That could be a way to operationalize it. It's not an instrument, it's more of a frequency, but that could be a way. And so each article is going to have a way that they've operationalized their quantitative variable. You just need to make sure that motivation, or whatever it is, performance, is in the article so that you can explain how it was operationalized. Now let's go down. Locate 2 quant research articles for each variable and examine how the variable has been operationalized. Then it asks for more. For each variable, note the references of the papers you have found and briefly explain how the variable was operationalized, which is basically what we just talked about. What I wanted to get to was this part. Next, explain how well you think each variable has been assessed in the papers you have chosen. Consider how the authors in each article explain why the way they defined and measured each variable was appropriate in your own opinion, your evaluation. You need to be logical and rational, but you're also maybe not an expert, but you're going to do your best. You can use references, as many as you want, to support your responses. So let's go back up. You would add on, I think Goodin, with the last name Goodin Mood, appropriate, sufficient, good job of operationalizing mood, especially because the study that I made up was about depressed mood. The BDI, the Beck Depression Inventory, is a psychometrically sound. If you don't know this, you need to, you could do some research. Or it might be obvious. The Beck Depression Inventory is a psychometrically sound instrument for measuring depression. And that's pretty good logic right there. You could even put a citation to support that assertion. Now, down here you might say, Hammerschmidt's operationalization of mood, i.e. love in this case, did not appear to be well operationalized. Why? Well, because he measured it, or she measured it, based on some quiz on Facebook that a 14-year-old boy developed in my hypothetical scenario. And therefore, you probably wouldn't want to trust those results. They haven't been tried. They haven't been tested for validity or reliability. No, they're probably about as accurate as a magic 8-ball or something like that maybe isn't very consistent. And we've all taken quizzes like that. If you haven't, good for you. You're better than me. I like to see what they say. I like to see which animal they say I'm going to be. And so for each article, not only are you saying how the variable was operationalized, you're giving a quality check. An evaluation of the operationalization of the variable. Right? So you're doing that for every single article to say whether they did a good job as assessed by you. So you're evaluating their operationalization, the way that they defined and measured the variable. So explain how well you think each variable has been assessed in the papers you've chosen. Consider how the authors in each article explain why the way they defined and measured each variable was appropriate in your evaluation. And definitely you can boost your score probably. Your instructor is probably, your professor is probably going to be a little impressed if you not only say it's psychometrically sound, but if you actually provide some proof of an article that says, well, I looked into the Beck Depression Inventory, and here's what this article says. It says it's a good instrument. It's tried and true. Whereas obviously the 14-year-old Facebook quiz is probably not going to provide reliable, valid results. In total, they say 4 to 6 pages, not including title and reference pages. It will probably be more in the 6-page range because this can get a little lengthy. One thing you don't need to do is really get into all the findings. That's unnecessary. That's not in any of the instructions. So no need to do that. Of course, demonstrate thoughtful consideration of the ideas and concepts presented in the course by providing new thoughts and insights related directly to this topic. You always want to show your professor, look, I wasn't just watching TV and playing with my kid while I wrote this assignment. I was paying attention. I was being conscientious and deliberate and focused. Your response should reflect scholarly writing and current APA standards. If you've been making mistakes, like on Berenson et al. 2018, what's the error there? Well, you forgot a comma, right? It needs to go there. A lot of people make all sorts of mistakes. They don't put the period, or they put Berenson comma et al, which is also wrong. So here's how it's supposed to look, right? If there's 2, you're going to have a semicolon. And let's say this is a 2-author article. You can have the ampersand between them. And one thing to note here is that C comes after B alphabetically, and therefore you need them in alphabetical order by the first letter of the last name of the first author. So within the parentheses, they should be Berenson before Carter. Alphabetical order by the first letter of the last name of the first author. And I know that can be a little confusing at first. You will get the hang of it. I believe in you. Upload your document, submit it. If you struggle, reach out. It's better to reach out before you submit assignments rather than after because, well, because it saves time. And you can sort of see if you're on the right track, especially if you start struggling in a course. I encourage you to sort of reach out to the instructor and say, the professor, and say, would it be possible if I could submit a draft of my work prior to submitting it officially just to see if I'm on the right track? And that's something to do if you're really struggling, and your professor is probably going to say something like, that's a great idea, because ultimately it will save them time as well. So go out there, do your best. Again, 8 articles. For each one, you're going to say how the variable of interest was operationalized, and then you're going to evaluate the way that they operationalized it. Thank you very much. Have a good day.